Welcome to the Queen of Hearts podcast. And here's the queen herself, registered dietitian Heather Klug.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Queen of Hearts podcast. Today we have a special guest with us. His name is Mike Rupsch. Welcome, Mike.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being with us today. Mike and I work for the same healthcare organization. It's called Advocate Aurora Health. And Mike works in the Employee Assistance Program, helping employees and their families with personal and work-related problems. Now, Mike has also been a guest speaker for a healthy lifestyle program that I teach and coordinate called the Living Well program. He shares with our participants his expertise on stress management, resilience, and happiness. Mike is very passionate about what he does. And Mike, I'm so happy you're here with us today so you can share what you know with our listeners. So I'm really excited to have Mike with us today on our podcast. We're doing this on stress management and how we view stress. And Mike, this is probably an understatement, but the world right now is dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and stress levels are even higher than usual. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. I'm sure you would agree, right?
Oh, yes. Whenever there's uncertainty, people begin to worry and become a little bit more anxious. And all of that is very stressful. That uncertainty and unknown is a trigger for the stress response.
Okay. Yeah. And I know you've been doing a lot just with our own employees to help them during this time. You've been sending them happiness and positivity emails and lots of helpful tips. I've been getting those and I really enjoy them. They're really great reminders. So today we're going to talk about the new stress management, and hopefully I can get Mike back sometime in the future to also talk about building resilience in our day-to-day life. So, okay, Mike, let's start by talking about stress. Since I've been to your classes, I know you have a different take on stress. Based on the research you've done, what we've all learned about stress isn't fully accurate. Is that true?
Well, it is kind of the error of omission. Most of the research that we hear about and most of the things well-meaning healthcare providers, therapists, family members and friends tell us is about one of three possible responses we may have to stress. And the science has shown that those three are the mindset, the threat mindset. And that's what we mostly hear about. But the other two mindsets, which is the challenge mindset and the connect mindset, are completely different. In the threat mindset, we, just as the word sounds, we respond to the stressor, the thing that's stressing us, as a threat. And that's a very primitive way our brain works. It evolved to do that. It perceives anything out of the ordinary, anything that's distressing as a danger. And our brain takes off in the fight or flight response. And over time, if we don't do something to take on the challenge, to connect meaningfully with others, then we stay stuck in that threat mindset. And that's where we can experience possibly some health problems in response. If all you ever do is stay stuck in that threat response, hormone levels change. One hormone in particular that changes is cortisol. When cortisol goes down, and that happens for a long time, and you're predisposed to one of the stress-related illnesses, you're a little more likely to get it. And those stress-related illnesses are things like depression, like heart disease, type 2 diabetes is another example. And so that's the threat response. And that's pretty much what we hear about. And we don't hear a lot about the challenge response and the connect response. Now,
okay.
Go ahead.
So I was going to say, so having a threat response to stress will have negative effects on our heart and the rest of our body, like you were talking about cortisol and what that does to the body. So what would be a much healthier way to respond to stress, since we don't want to be in that threat mindset, right?
Right. And just remember that the threat mindset is really more of an alert. But our brain kind of alerts us when something out of the ordinary or potentially stressful happens. And what also our brain has evolved to do is to take on challenges. So that's the second mindset, the second response that we can have to stress. We can take on a challenge, perceive the stress, even shift our mindset into, okay, what can I do about this? How can I contribute to a positive outcome here? Even asking yourself some questions about, is it really helping me to get overly stressed about this? What can I do about it? The challenge mindset really helps considerably because it negates and turns off all the negative parts of the threat mindset. Just again, to review those negative things. When you're in that threat, that negative mindset response, you've got too much adrenaline going on. You've got cortisol levels going up. Your blood vessels are narrowing. Essentially, your heart is beating faster, and essentially your body is getting ready to fight or flight. Over time, that can really be debilitating. You can imagine if you get stressed out 10 times a day and you stay stuck in the threat response, that means your blood vessels are narrowing 10 times a day and your heart is beating too hard 10 times a day. That's not a good thing.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Fortunately, the challenge mindset and the connect mindset are also a result of evolution. Though we always had to be on the lookout back in ancient times, 20,000 years ago, for instance, we had to be on the lookout for danger. Our brain evolved to have the threat response. Likewise, our brain evolved to take on challenges. Can you imagine if you lived in an ancient village and a challenge came up? Of course you had to take on the challenge because back in that time, that challenge could decide whether you were going to be alive or not. So we developed the ability to gladly and positively take on challenges. And when you do that, there isn't any cardiovascular narrowing. Your heart is pumping freely and a little faster because you also will have a little jolt of adrenaline because that's how the whole thing starts. But that adrenaline is energizing you and your brain is setting itself up to learn from the situation. That doesn't happen in the threat mindset.
Okay. Wow, that's really fascinating, actually. So you're experiencing stress and the adrenaline is surging, but because you're in that challenge mindset where you're seeing it as an opportunity, the stress isn't affecting the body negatively. Do I have that correct?
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can start out in the threat mindset and then realize, oh, that's right. There I am. I need to take on the challenge. And you shift into trying to do something to contribute to a positive outcome or at least get through the situation as positively as possible. The negative bodily response stops.
Oh, that's really cool. And we can talk about that more in a little bit because I'm sure you have some other tips for shifting from a threat mindset to
Yes.
a healthier response to the stress. But can I just share a story kind of quickly first? Yeah. So a couple weeks ago, and you can tell me if this was, an example of the challenge mindset or not. But a couple weeks ago, I was taking my daughter to Taekwondo. Okay. She just started taking classes, I don't know, like a month or so ago. And she was going to her first testing for this. So you're in like a bigger group and there's lots of people there. And she was a little nervous about that, even though she'd been practicing and everything. So we get there and we're sitting in the car. And before we get out, she says, "Oh, Mom, I'm really nervous, and she's like, I'm not sure I want to do this." And I said, "You've been practicing for this. You've been practicing for a while. You are ready to do this." And I said, "Are you feeling like you kind of have little butterflies in your stomach?" And she goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that's kind of adrenaline, right? Going through your body. And that's actually a good thing because it's going to give you some energy, before you do your testing. So it's okay." We talked about her just, trying to take a couple deep breaths and, using that energy in a good way. And then I also shared with her, I said, I get those butterflies in my stomach too all the time. I said, I have to go and do talks in front of large numbers of people. Sometimes I'm on TV and on the radio and there's thousands of people listening. And I said, I get nervous every time, even if it's a talk I've done 100 times. I'm nervous every time. I get those butterflies in my stomach and I just take some deep breaths and I try to use that kind of surge in energy in a good way, right? Because I feel like, okay, it's going to give me some energy and I can do what I need to do. So is that an example of like the challenge mindset?
That is an excellent example. And you were sharing your own experience of doing that very thing. And You were inviting her into thinking about it, having the same kind of mindset. And so what you were doing there was you were not only expressing how you do the challenge mindset, but you were also practicing the connect mindset. When we're in stressful situations, it's natural and normal for us to want to connect with others to help and to get the help that we need. And you reached out to your daughter, and it was brilliant, Heather. You did exactly the right thing. And you connected with her, and you have a long, deep relationship with her. So the words that you say have real meaning, non-threatening. They were both comforting and challenging at the same time. And so you connected meaningfully. That is an important part of stress management. So,
ooh, yay.
Yay,
me.
Yeah. The connect response is mediated by a hormone. It's actually a stress hormone, but it's a multi-purpose hormone. It's called oxytocin, considered to be the care, compassion, and love hormone. When a mother is nursing her newborn baby, researchers found she is flooded with oxytocin. And hormone we evolved to have in our brain. And it's actually secreted from our pituitary gland. And the reason why we evolved to do that is because mothers need to bond with their babies. But guess what else happens? If mom hands the baby to the other parent gets a surge of this oxytocin and automatically feels care and compassion and love. You see a puppy or a cute picture, or you even think about a cute baby animal, you do get a little jolt of oxytocin. And this oxytocin makes you want to care. It gives you compassion. And from an evolutionary standpoint, you can see how brilliant the human mind is to have evolved to do this. Because in ancient times, when bad things happened every single day, because life was so terribly life and death dangerous, our brain evolved to naturally be compelled to help others and to ask for help when we need it. Isn't that great? A good example.
It is. Yeah.
In current day life, a great example of that is if you're walking down the hall at work and someone is passing you in the hallway who's holding a bunch of papers in her hand and she drops them. And what is the first thing you want to do?
You want to pick them up.
Yeah, you want to help.
Yeah, you want to help her.
Yeah. And isn't that great that we do that?
Yeah, so when we're doing that, oxytocin is actually being released?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Another wonderful example of it is I call it an aha or a heart softening moment. We've all had that experience. Our heart softens a little bit. It's sort of like an awe, that puppy's so cute.
Yeah.
You're watching TV. Let's say you're watching a Netflix series. In the first couple of episodes, there's a character that you don't like. You haven't heard any of the backstory of this character's life, but you just don't care for that character. Well, about episode 4, you start to get the backstory, and you find out what this person's character's life has been like, and you kind of go, "Oh man, that guy's had a rough time," or that person has had a rough time. And your heart kind of goes a little bit softer and go to that person, to that character. That's oxytocin. It happens all the time. And actually, we can make it happen, by letting our heart be soft, letting our heart be open to other people and other ideas. And also, the research shows that if you think about a baby animal, you'll get a jolt of oxytocin.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense. I think for why they bring in therapy animals too, right? To the hospital,
Yes.
there's therapy dogs or sometimes people do maybe treatment with animals. Oh, that makes so much sense now because it's kind of helping with that connect mindset or connect response that you're saying and just getting that little jolt of the oxytocin in there. So, wow, that's really fascinating.
It's kind of neat to think of these things as our brain brilliantly evolved to have these abilities, to have these responses. And the human species could not have made it if we didn't pay attention to when dangerous things happen. So I'm going to reframe the threat response to be the alert response. We could not have continued as a species if we didn't know how to take on challenges and if we didn't want to help others.
Yeah, yeah. Now you mentioned that the going back to the challenge mindset, that it's not causing damage to your body. So I'm guessing it's similar for the connect mindset. Is that
Yes.
correct too? Okay.
Yes, and oxytocin actually has been shown to help repair micro damage in the heart.
Really?
Yeah. So if someone doesn't tell you about these other two things, the challenge and the connect mindset, and only tells you about the threat mindset, you're only getting a very small part of the story, as you can see. Not only are there things we can do to cope with stress that's real and upsetting and unsettling, the challenge response and the connect response will help protect your health.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. So that's good to know that switching to a challenged mindset or to a connect mindset when dealing with stress or you're in a stressful situation, that those two mindsets aren't harmful at all and they're actually protective,
Correct.
in terms of your health. So
That,
how do we make that shift to the challenge or connect mindset? I know you mentioned it a little bit when you were
uh-huh.
talking about the challenge mindset. But what are some steps or what are some things that our listeners can do? Because right now we need that more than ever, I think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'll tell it via a story, a personal.
Okay.
Several years ago, and ironically, it was right at the time that I was learning about this information about the connect and the challenge mindset. I woke up in the middle of the night and I had a terrible, painful cramp in my leg. And so I did what most of us would do. I went back to sleep. you know,
Uh,
Sort of like you try, if your car isn't running right, you turn it off and hope that it's okay the next time you turn it on. I thought, if I go back to sleep, I'll wake up and it's gone. But what I
yeah.
did not know, and I didn't find out till about a week later, is that I had a blood clot. And I had a blood clot. And of course, when you get a blood clot, you have to take injections of heparin for a couple of weeks. And the nurse who told me this and showed me how to give myself an injection didn't know that I was really afraid of needles. So she sends me on my way with my prescription, and I get all the needles, and I'm ready to do this. But I get up the next morning, and I am just so stressed out. But I wasn't thinking of it that way. I was firmly in the threat response. My body was tense. My jaw was clenched. My heart was racing, and I gave myself the shot anyway. So for a couple of days, I'm doing this. I'm just white knuckling it, so to speak. Very unpleasant, very fearful. Finally, on the third morning, a little voice in my head asked me the question, why are you so stressed about this? And mind you, I had been studying these three mindsets at the same time. It took 2 days and the next morning to realize I answered the question, why am I so stressed out about this? It's because I'm in the threat response. And so I noticed that I was stressed in the threat response. So the first thing you can do is notice the signs of stress. And I could have noticed them a couple of days before, but I just didn't. I was so stuck in that moment of fear that I didn't notice it. And finally, on that third morning, when I asked myself the question, I said, gosh, yeah, man, I'm sweating and I'm clenching my jaw and my body is tense. I'm in the threat response. So the next thing I did was I embraced the moment. And I actually embraced the moment. I thought, this is my fear of needles. I know this. Here's an opportunity to challenge my fear of needles. I'm going to take on the challenge. So literally, you got to embrace the moment and take on the challenge. I had a lot of energy because I had a ton of adrenaline, right? Because I was facing this held fear. And I used that energy to take on the challenge. And I can remember a saying coming into my head at some point along the line. And here it is. There's a job to be done, and I'm the one to do it. That really hit me. That struck me. I'm the one to do it. Hey, guess what? I'm the only one to do it. That's pretty cool. And I can do it. And so I made the decision. That's another important part. You got to make a decision that you're going to do it. It may not be easy, but you make that decision. And what happens is your perception and your mindset about the problem shifts a little bit. And you'll notice a decrease in worry and energy because you committed yourself. You made a decision. You're going to be better able to face the challenge. And what I did is I fell into what the next thing is, which lighten up a little bit about the stress, about the thing that you're facing. Just try to lighten up a little bit. And I said to myself, I want to be the best shot giver in history.
Oh,
That's my goal on this. It was, I don't know, it just popped into my mind. It was a little playful,
yeah.
a little positive. And I kind of turned it into a competition with myself. And that turned it into a little bit of fun. But I had gotten really empowered by this shift I had and the fact that I could take on the challenge of since childhood, this long held fear that I had of needles. And then when I get the opportunity to tell the story, I tell the story because an important part of when you're shifting into the challenge and the connect mindset and you're working your way through the stressful situation and you have a success, it's really important that you tell someone about it. Because it turns out that telling someone about your success, about your achievement, more deeply wires it into your brain.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And does it matter if you say it verbally or, a lot of people connect online these days, like if you have a blog or you send a text or you put it on Facebook or
I think
whatever. Does that count too?
You bet it does.
Okay.
And it, though I haven't read anywhere, but it makes sense to me that it's the retelling of the story with the positive outcome already having happened. And you have all of the positive emotions connected to your success as you retell the story.
That makes sense. Okay.
And so it truly anchors, if you can imagine, anchoring the positive emotions to what started out to be a potentially negative experience and turns out to be a victory.
Okay. So it sounded like you had 5 steps there. Is that correct? Like you recognize it and then you
embrace the moment and use the energy.
Okay. And then you're saying something different, like, I can do this, it's up to me, or something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you make the commitment.
Yes.
And then
you try to lighten up a little bit. Try to be a little playful about it. There's some wonderful science on playing games that when we play games, we automatically click into the challenge mindset. Now, when you play a game with a friend or a family member, I don't know, I play a Scrabble game with my dad online. And I don't get onto the game and then go be thinking to myself, oh, no, I guess I'm going to lose again. Kind of the Eeyore response.
Yeah.
No, my brain cranks up. And this is what naturally happens to everybody when they play a game. Your brain cranks up and goes, yeah, let's go. That's the challenge response.
Okay.
Turning it into a little bit more playful, a little bit lighter. Even if you're a kind of person who could turn it into a game, I made it into this kind of imaginary competition with myself. Hey, I did a better job this time. Almost like I was a judge, at an Olympic event. Judging doing. It kept it light.
Okay. And then the last step, is it the last step that you share it with other people? So it really kind of forces that connection in your brain, right?
Yes.
Now, so you shared kind of a personal experience. And I know since I've been to your classes before that you've also talked about how these 3 different stress mindsets have been studied in the real world. Can you share 1 or 2 of these studies?
Yeah. I'll share one that is really quite powerful. It was a study done with freshmen in high school. And so this psychologist had, at the beginning of the school year, had all of the freshmen in gym class in the gymnasium, and they were in their gym uniforms. Can you imagine anything more embarrassing? The beginning of the school year, you don't know anybody because you've come from all these different schools. And what happened was the students received a 30-minute, one-time, what the researchers call mindset intervention. Now, this interview is kind of like a mindset intervention. We're trying to help shift people's ideas about something. In our case, stress. In this case, the researcher wanted to help these freshmen get through a rite of passage. And freshman year in high school is truly a rite of passage. It's a time in development, personal, emotional, and social development that can really be challenging. And it's a rite of passage everybody goes through. And so the researcher wanted to see if he could get that to happen quickly. And what a challenge. In 30 minutes. And this is what he did. He told the students that the research has shown that at the age they're at as freshmen, people often believe that they're alone, that no one cares about them or can help them, and that they'll never change. The researcher wants students to learn that people can change in significant ways. And so he told the students, remember, who you are is not necessarily who you will be later in life. How people treat you and see you now is not necessarily a sign of who you really are and who you will be in the future. And people's personalities can change meaningfully over time. And the researcher went on to say, and we have proof in our studies of this, and we're going to show you some things. And so what they had them do next was read essays that older students who got through freshman year told them about their success doing that and how much better their life was once they got through it. And then the final thing was they had students write an essay for next year's freshmen. So they were writing an essay for people they'd never met a whole year later. And what happened was, and they followed these students all through the school year. That was it. That was the whole intervention. Identifying what typically happens, then teaching them a new point of view. Essentially, that people change, that they can change, that things can get better. Them something to do, which was read those essays, and then they offered them the opportunity to share it with someone else through writing their own essay. And this is what they found at the end of the school year for the students who'd been through the intervention. They were less overwhelmed by life problems. They were more optimistic. They had fewer health problems, so they missed less school, were less likely to become depressed, which is a significant issue in that age group today. 81% of the freshmen in the study passed freshman algebra. In the control group, who were not in the study, only 58% passed algebra. So that intervention increased passing freshman algebra by 23%. Amazing. The students who were at high risk coming into freshman year entered freshman year with a 1.6 grade point average out of 4. And they finished freshman year as a result of that 30-minute intervention. They finished with a 2.6 grade point average. So you can see that 30-minute intervention created a fork in the road in a couple of essential ways. More freshmen passed freshman algebra. And many of us who got through algebra in high school know that is a fork in the road. A lot of stuff doesn't happen if you don't ever pass algebra. And those students who are at risk went into sophomore year less at risk.
Sure.
So really, that is a very, very powerful example of how this stuff works.
Right. I mean, I could even see too, Mike, like just learning that at that age, that's something, if you really internalize that and you see positive results from that, that's going to stick with you and you can use that then throughout your whole lifetime too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You did that with your daughter in your example. And so the 3 things are learn a new point of view, do something that puts the new point of view into practice, and then tell someone about your success. So what you did is you offered her, your daughter, as she approached her testing in Taekwondo, a new point of view about butterflies in the stomach. Actually, I don't think you even used, in the way you told the story, negative terms. You just called it butterflies in the stomach, which was a wonderful way to do it. Hey, this is not bad. It's just butterflies in the stomach. We can do this.
Yeah.
She naturally had a way to put it into practice in the moment. She could realize it, learn it, realize it. And even though she had those butterflies, stay with them and then go succeed at the activity. And then she could tell you about how it went. Because
Yeah.
you asked her, hey, how'd it go? And she was able to say, that wasn't so bad.
Right.
So you did a mindset intervention with your daughter.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So it really seems like the bottom line is don't be scared of stress. Try to not see it as a threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be in our lives, our everyday lives, whether we like it or not. And instead, let's try to approach stress as an opportunity or a challenge, see it in a new light or use it as a way to connect with others.
Correct.
And yeah, and from that lens, stress can actually enhance our lives because we may achieve more than we thought we could. And it helps us connect with others, which is so important too. Are
Yeah.
there are there any other things you want to mention about stress that would be great for our listeners to know?
Well, I think it would be good to make the connection between stress and meaning. And by meaning, we mean the meaning and purpose of your life, what you do, the important things in your life. There was a Gallup poll stress survey in 2005 and 6 that looked at 121 countries. 125,000 people were surveyed, and they were asked the question, did you feel a great deal of stress yesterday? So what they do, the Gallup poll people do, is they ask a key question or several questions, and then they gather a lot of data from the participants about their lives, about their families and their history. And also they gather information about data about the community they live in and the place they live, even the nation they live in. And so they wanted to see what data was connected with a yes answer to the question, did you feel a great deal of stress yesterday? And worldwide, 33% said yes, they had felt a great deal of stress yesterday. In the United States, that number was 43%.
Mm,
Now you would think, well, that's
interesting.
bad. But guess what? Those groups that said yes also had the following. They had a higher life expectancy. They lived in a nation with a higher gross domestic product. That means a better economy. They were happier. Now, wait a minute. How can I be happy and stressed? They were happier. They were less likely to be depressed. I thought that depression was one of those stress illnesses. How
Yeah.
could that be? They had a higher life satisfaction. And the key piece was they identified their lives as more meaningful. And that study and other studies have shown that if you identify meaning in the stress that you experience, you will do better in the stress. So what are the main stressors in life? What are the things that trigger us into that threat or might say alert response? They're the daily things, the daily hassles of our life. It's about parenting and caregiving and work, relationships. Those are all the things that cause us the most frequent stress because they're daily things.
Yeah.
We remember while we're going through those things that they're meaningful to us, that they have great meaning and purpose. Then the stress doesn't bother you as much. You don't pay that price, that hormonal price with your cortisol level going down. So the ability to find meaning in the stress is really key.
Okay. Okay. So that's pretty cool. So actually, having a higher level of stress isn't always a negative thing. It sounds like as
No.
long as there's that greater sense of meaning to go along with it.
If this wasn't true, even if the science didn't show it to be true, if this wasn't true, here's the example. The example is that none of us would have made it through being an infant because
It's
having
true.
a baby is one of the most stressful times and the most wonderful times of life. So that's a good example of this idea of stress and meaning. Heather, you remember what it was like to have newborn babies. And
Oh yeah. Well, it's a while ago now, but oh yeah, that was the first year of life it's kind of stressful, but it was also, like you said, it was also exciting too. It was cool to see how much they changed day to day, all the things they would learn, right? And you start
uh-huh.
to see their personality to develop. So yeah, it was a tough time, but it was also, I don't know, an interesting time too, right?
Yeah. And it serves, these times of meaning also serve us later in life, all through life, because we tell stories about things like that. Oh, you take out a picture, you see a picture of when one of your children was a baby, and guess what hormone gets secreted?
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin, right. We tell those stories. I just talking about this stuff and telling these stories makes me remember my son as a baby and as a little one. And my heart just softens. And I know I've got some oxytocin on board.
Yeah, when I stop and think about my life so far, it's often the things that didn't go as planned that I remember very vividly, and that I can kind of laugh about now, right? It's like almost like those memories kind of stick in your brain a little bit more, especially if it was something where you did have to problem solve and really kind of come up with a solution.
Yes, absolutely. I had an experience. I'm a jazz guitarist. And I had the opportunity to play guitar with one of the greatest guitarists in history of jazz guitar. And I found myself in the moment when I was doing it, saying to myself, I should be nervous. I should be terrified. And another voice came in my head, which was the challenge voice, said, oh no, this is too much fun. I'm not going to get nervous. It was fun.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool.
This idea of fun, excitement, nervous anxiety, they live on the same razor's edge. Think about being at an amusement park and you're waiting in line to go on the roller coaster and you love the roller coaster. And closer, you get a little nervous, don't you?
Yeah.
You get excited also. And in the end, excitement wins out.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. My family and I love roller coasters. So yeah, you get that blend, you're right, of both in there. Nervousness, but also the excitement at the same time. So Mike, one last question for you. What kind of information can you give to our listeners for moving forward with what they've heard today?
Okay, good question. This is what I'd suggest. I'd suggest you take the same approach that a researcher did with those freshmen in high school. Which is learn a new point of view, do something to put it into practice, and tell someone about your experience doing that. And so here we go. Learn a new point of view. I would challenge you to identify and write down even one important thing that you learned during this presentation. Then 2, to do something. Identify something you can do today to put it into practice. You got learning. How are you going to put it into practice? And then once you've tried it, who are you going to tell about it? And that should get the ball rolling.
Well, that's great. I love it because that's something, these are things we can do day to day. And I just love all the information you shared, just on having that different point of view with stress. I really think that's going to help a lot of people, Mike. So a big thank you again to Mike Rupsch for sharing this fascinating information on the 3 stress mindsets, how we can shift to a challenge or connect mindset to reduce the negative effects of stress on the body and the mind, and how stress can actually bring meaning to our lives. Well, that's it for today, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And as we always say, be the ruler of your own heart. Goodbye.
Thank you for joining us on the Queen of Hearts podcast. Our podcast is recorded here at the Karen Yance Women's Cardiac Awareness Center inside Aurora St. Luke's Medical Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. For more heart-healthy tips, info, recipes, and more, visit our website at www.karenyancecenter.org, like us on Facebook at Karen Yance Center, and follow us on Pinterest. If you like what you hear, subscribe to our show and be sure to tell your friends. Until next time, ladies, be ruler of your own heart.